longevity, it's mostly related to a state of inflammation. When we start to have an increased destruction and not the capability to resupply, that's when we tilt at the point of no return, and we start that process of aging that will bring us down.
If you want to live like you matter, ditch the pills, look great, and feel freaking amazing, you're in the right place. I'm Dr. Wendy Trudeau.
I'm Dr. Ed Levitan. Welcome to the 5 Journeys podcast,
where we empower you to live a vibrant and healthy life by optimizing your structural, chemical, emotional, social, and spiritual lives.
Hang on to your hats.
Welcome to the 5 Journeys podcast, Live Like You Matter. I am beyond psyched for our guest today because it's Dr. Alessio Fasano, Director of the Center for Celiac Research and Treatment at Mass General Hospital for Children in Boston, Massachusetts. He's the author of Gluten Freedom, a book for general readers about celiac disease and gluten-related disorders, and co-author with Susie Flaherty of Gut Feelings, The Microbiome and Our Health, published in March 2021 by MIT Press. Welcome, Dr. Fasano.
Thank you, Wendy.
Very welcome.
So I want to talk about zonulins because literally when I read that paper, I was like, this is the root cause of autoimmune disease. This is why you get brain fog. This is why people get so sick. It's just fascinating to me. Like, how did you get into zonulins?
So long time ago, I was very much interested to how microorganisms interact with us, how they can crosstalk, and what is the outcome of this interaction. At that time, we were looking at one microorganism at a time, not as we do now with this whole, ecosystem that we call the microbiome. And my interest was on cholera, believe it or not, because, when I went to medical school and I was trying to find a niche to save the world, and I was thinking to get in research with cancer or something, my boss at that time that became my mentor said, you don't want to do that. You want to focus on diarrheal diseases. And I said, you're joking, right? Diarrheal disease is not glamorous.
Are you shitting me?
That's right. You shitting me? And he said, that every year, this was again a while ago, 5 million kids die because of diarrhea. And that changed the prospect of the story. And, the following few years, I studied with him the physiology of the gastrointestinal tract. And again, in my naive kind of approach on life, I told him, I know everything about the host. Now I need to learn about the bug. Where should I go? And he said, well, I think that the best place is in United States, in Maryland, in Baltimore. The place is called Center for Vaccine Development. They do this kind of stuff on enteric pathogens, including cholera. You go there. And for the following 2 years, I was in Baltimore studying, this bug and ultimately to develop a vaccine. So in other words, something that eventually can be given to kids that will not die of cholera. And the approach taken was to take the bug and taking out the weapons that he used to make this purging diarrhea that make people dying with cholera because of dehydration. This was at the very beginning that molecular biology allowed us to cut and paste genes. So there was very cool stuff. And eventually I was put in charge in doing that on this bug. And after a fair amount of time and a lot of failures, I was able to develop this live attenuated vaccine that did not produce this huge purging of diarrhea in animal models because the bug did not have the weapon anymore. There was this very powerful toxins that is called cholera toxin. Time was ready for prime time, so that we had to give this to volunteers. Volunteers meaning medical students. That's
obviously
a fair amount of money.
Wait. Alessio, did you give them cholera and then test the vaccine on them? Or how did you test that it worked?
Well, exactly. The way they went was they were paid a huge amount of money, $500, to be locked in, because of course you don't want to spread cholera around, in a facility at University of Maryland, and you had 3 chances. 1, placebo. So water. So you will take $500 for nothing. 2, my vaccine that will work because I showed in animals that they were not sick. Or 3, the real deal, you shit your pants, but we would take care of you. 2 out of 3, though, was in your favor. So that was the premise. And we did the trial. It did not work. I mean, the placebo didn't get sick. The folks, that, got the real deal and up to 10 gallons of diarrhea, but we took care of them. The ones that they got the cholera vaccine had much less diarrhea, but still enough, a couple of gallons of diarrhea that made the vaccine not suitable. So bottom line, 2 years just flushed in the toilet, literally. So I got drunk for a couple of days. I didn't show up in the lab.
Years, okay.
Very depressed. And then, again, typically what distinguishes, somebody that has the intellectual curiosity to do research, I went back to the blackboard and said, what went wrong? How come that, this vaccine did not work? End up to discover another toxin besides, the powerful one that I took out, by genetic engineering the vaccine, that rather than, purge water through the cell, as the typical toxin they do, they loosen up the space in between cells. So these gates that keep the cells tied together. There was a black box at that time because we little knew that this space was dynamic. There was just the beginning understanding that, you can even increase, opening of the space in between cells. And therefore, this toxin was a brand new category of toxin with a very different and peculiar mechanism of action. And I started to study the mechanism of action. I got more and more inside of what this key open these gates in between, cells do to reach the point in which, this toxin goes after a very sophisticated machinery of these cells. I can't believe that this machine is there just to be the target of a bug that makes us sick. Probably cholera has been smart enough to understand and exploit something that we do for other purposes ourselves. So that led me to think there must be a counterpart molecule that does this job for us to open and close these gates in between cells. And that's how we discovered, the first member of the zonon family.
That was in the brain, right? It wasn't in the gut, I think.
At the beginning, we discovered, in the brain, the receptor, and it was the brain first. But then, we discovered these families they are everywhere. They are in the gut, they are in the heart, they are in the brain, the kidney, and so on and so forth. And of course, in after the discovery, we start to ask what this molecule does for a living, why we have it. And we realize it's important for some physiological reasons. And as typically happen when you push physiology to the limits, you get into the disease, territory. And, we start asking, what kind of disease may have an issue in which you don't control the trafficking of the junk from the environment into your body that can eventually have, consequences. Of course, food allergies, chronic inflammation, they were on the list. But I was very much interested for personal reason in autoimmunity. And that's how I focused mainly on autoimmune disease, because that's also an issue in which we little knew, that beside the genetic predisposition and the exposure of something in the environment that makes you sick, there is also the need that this instigator needs to come in our body. And there was no port of entry that we were aware of. These are molecules that are very large. These are, in general, proteins that will instigate the immune system to mount an immune response against their own body. And they cannot come through unless something goes wrong in these gates. And that's how the rest is history.
So I want to go back to the work that you're doing. So Are you allowed to talk about the medicine? Because I never want to eat gluten, and it's gotten 95% better, but I'll still get a headache. I'll still have some brain fog. And my gut still reacts
with tiny amount of cross contamination.
Oh yeah, tiny cross contamination. So can you talk about the medicine you're developing and when's it going to come to market? No pressure, Alessio, but I've really been waiting for years.
The medicine that you're alluding to, this larazodide, is an inhibitor of this zonulin. So in other words, it binds to the receptor and doesn't allow zonulin to signal to the cell to open these gates. And has been developed now for a while. It's now in a phase 3 trial for celiac disease. We end up to have the possibility to use the same molecule because, zonulin is involved also in the pathogenesis, some long COVID complications, particularly in kids, what we call the multi-organ inflammatory system or MIS-C syndrome, MIS-C, and now it's in phase 2 trial there. What this molecule does is stop this trafficking, for celiac disease of gluten, for MIS-C of this spike protein from COVID-19 from the gut into the bloodstream that causes the cytokine storm that makes this folks sick and so on and so forth. Drug development is a very long and inefficient route. Now we talk about phase 3 for celiac disease. The phase 3 is still ongoing, may fail anytime or may be successful anytime. So when you say how long it takes, I don't know. The only thing that I know for the little that I've been involved, and I work in academia, but, I helped to set up this company that, now is non-existent anymore, that was in charge of this molecule, is when you bring this molecule from the doorsteps of science to clinical applicability, the success of failure depends not on the science anymore, but business choice, study design, how you cut corners and you do this right, economic crisis like we had in 2008, so there was no money to do any trials, a pandemic that makes recruiting impossible. So there are so many things that can derail, the process. So I cannot answer the question if and when this molecule will be on the market. But the idea is, indeed, as your beloved husband was saying, a safety net. So that that all the time, particularly when you're outside of your household, because home you know what you're doing, there is a chance that somebody will not do the job right. Taking the pill that will allow you to have that peace of mind that you will be protected in case of cross-contamination, makes a world of difference for celiac disease, for which we know the trigger. Imagine all the other immune diseases for which we don't know the trigger, so we don't have the option to take anything out. That will protect eventually, if it works also for these other immune diseases, to have this trafficking of God knows what that makes these people sick.
What are the downsides, out of curiosity, for the drug too?
The downsides is that you have to take this every single time that you eat, because there can be a good thing or bad thing, because its action, it's like for 2-3 hours. And therefore, you have to take this often. But on the other hand, the fact that it's short-lived avoids, complication and blocking the system that must be there because we need it. And acts in the gut, so it doesn't go systemically. So in general, the side effects are due to the presence of something that doesn't belong to your body in your bloodstream, and this doesn't go there. So these are the features at advantage. You have to take that for life because it's not a cure. It's a treatment. So that's the other downside to this.
So when are we getting the CRISPR gene change to fix all the celiacs?
Hey, I don't know if genetic editing would be the solution, actually. Personally, if you're born with the genes, we talk about celiac disease, but we can talk about, again, anything else, Alzheimer's, breast cancer, and so on and so forth. The gene editing, it's such a difficult path to follow. But I believe that learning what kind of mistakes that made us to accelerate the incidence of this stuff will allow us to do what I believe will be much easier: prevention, primary prevention. Try to intercept that. rather than fix when it's already broken. So my dream is to be the Jeff Philip of the situation, so that you come to me to change your oil rather than the mechanic of the situation because I am the mechanic now. You come when your engine is broken and I have to fix your engine. It's much more complicated. It's much more costly to do that. And in that sense, we have two big projects ongoing. The one is on celiac disease, and the other one is on autism, to try to understand on a specific genetic background of risk, because these are neonates that they have somebody in the family with either disease. How come that some of these kids will eventually derail and develop celiac disease or autism, and others stay put and will not? And we do what we call now this multiomics. We look at their genes, we look at their microbiome, we look at their zonings, we look at their proteomics, the metabolomic profiling, and trying to see any sign that will suggest me that they are making that turn that will lead to their final destination that's the wrong one. And now we start to see that there are, particularly derailment in the microbiome, that epigenetically will make some genes that will influence gut permeability or permeability barriers, because dysbiosis will increase zoning. That eventually will start their march from genetic predisposition to clinical outcome. And this requires a huge amount of data that needs to be modeled through artificial intelligence to do prediction model, so that if I know that when they shift the microbiome in a certain way, and the model is telling me that because of that, in 10 years, her chance to develop Alzheimer is 75%, I have a way to bring her back and say, I changed the microbiome, so I epigenetically turn off what has been turned on, and this is not going to happen. Prevention, again, is much cheaper than treatment. And by the way, because the goal is quality of life and containing the healthcare expenses, it's a win-win situation for everybody, for the patients, for the health insurance, for who cares about our population in terms of political, social issues and so on. So I see this as a future. Your office, for example, somebody goes to this office, and that would be me. I give her my genomic chip that I have on my chain here. She looks into the computer with 23,000 genes, and she will eventually receive also the stool samples that I brought with me because she told me to do so. And she's going to put in the back of her office in the machine that will analyze the microbiome while we talk. And, we'll also do some epigenetic analysis. And by the time that she finishes her physical exam on me, she has all this data in the computer that is now comparing this data to gazillions of similar data that model what will be the outcome when all these pieces they come together. And she would tell me, yeah, Alessio, you are fine. You will live healthy until age 72.5, after which you have 92% chance to develop, Parkinson. And we need to change this by manipulating what I can, that is your microbiome. And this is what you need to do. Come back in 6 months and let's see if we made this happening. I come back in 6 months, we go through the same routine. She do the modeling and say, oh, that risk for 92% now is 5%. I think that's stay put there. And she can give me probiotics, symbiotics, prebiotics, a diet, because I'm pretty sure that the future is most of the diseases can be handled with the diet, because of what I'm telling you, that the microbiome is so influential for so many reasons why we develop diseases that, as we derail by changing the microbiome, we can bring this back. And when I say microbiome, I intend, the zoning, the antigen trafficking, all 9 yards, because they all influence each other. It would be much better to do that way.
Yeah. I mean, that requires quantum computing, my guess.
Well, Genova Diagnostics is doing that now on the stool samples. It's a report that drives me nuts. And we said to them, this report drives us nuts. It drives the patients nuts. Put it towards the end, because people would get stuck on people with your similar microbiome often have these different things. It's still there, where they go the up and the down. It's so hard to look at.
the general principle is it's correct. It's not mature though for prime time use because we don't have all this data. We don't have that mathematical modeling that's been building. That's what we're doing now. But we have to, before running, you need to learn walking, and before walking, you need to learn crawling. We are barely sitting and not standing yet.
I don't even think we're pushing up. We're flat.
Exactly.
We're flat. Just try to turn your head to the side.
Exactly right. But we will be able to at some point. So, but again, of course, there are some. I'm not saying this is the Genova's case, but there are some companies that are trying to really exploit the potentials running while we don't know how to run yet, and we may take misstep, so to speak. And again, because I know what kind of healthcare business you guys involved, ultimately, our goal as a healthcare professional is to improve the quality of life for people. That's what it is. No more, no less, no matter what it takes. And, for me, when I got to push back and said, geez, you're saying that we're, doing so many things wrong right now, but, life expectancy now is 80 years. It's now 14 years like was, 2 million years ago. And that's true. But how we achieve their goals, major milestones. We were spending 95% for food procurement and 5% of procreation. That's what we were doing 2 million years ago. When we, with the advent of agriculture, domesticated food and crops, there was a major milestone 10,000 years ago. Now we free up time to build the Eiffel Tower, the Colosseum, because now we can unleash the creativity. We have more time. But, when we reach the point in which you ask yourself, it's better to live up to 60, but self-sufficient and healthy, or up to 80, but on a wheelchair with the tube of your nose and, pull-ups because you shit your pants.
Quality over quantity.
Well, it's health span versus lifespan.
That's right. I believe that both can be achieved if we make the right choices that are not that hard to, put on a piece of paper, but extremely hard to implement. To go back to the Zonulins, for example, longevity is mostly related to a state of inflammation. As a matter of fact, this is called inflammaging. All our cells in our body, they are destroyed and, resupplied with new cells, with a few exceptions. When we start to have an increased destruction and not the capability to resupply, that's when we tilt at the point of no return, and we start that process of, aging that will bring us down to a point of no return, and we die. Unless, again, an intervening disease will speed up the process. If you look at ultracentenarian, their level of zonulin is extremely low compared to people in the 40s or the 50s with cardiovascular diseases.
It all ties in.
Right.
Unfortunately, we got to actually...
I could legit chat with you all day. So, Alessio, we'll put everything in the show notes. Is there something in particular you want people to follow you on or find you, or like both books? Like, what do you want to tell people and as we sort of close down?
I think that, again, most of the stuff that we discuss is in the book that Susan and I put together. There was a work of love and sweat and pain, because we're writing on the microbiome. When you write a chapter and then you move to the next, and the previous chapter are already obsolete because, the literature, I've never seen anything like this. It's still hot. 700 papers a day comes out. I don't have any comparison to any other field in the past. And that, again, we try to really put some fundamental pillars that would not change in the discussion there, so that the book will not become obsolete. As a matter of fact, we finished the book, wrapped up, given to the editor, and COVID came, so we had to write that part. I mean, that was.
So, okay. So go read the book, go get the book, Gut Feelings, The Microbiome in Our Health. I
think that would be a good resource to rationalize why you need to do some changes or lifestyle choices to be capable to make full use of your potential of whatever Mother Nature gave you genetically, and play your cards, genetic cards, well, so that you can win the big game no matter what.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Dr. Fasano, thank you for joining us for another episode of the 5 Journeys podcast, Live Like You Matter. If this made a difference for you, pay it forward. Write a 5-star review so other people can discover it, and tell your friends. Have a great day. Don't go it alone.
It's not a social journey until others join.
Share this with your friends.